Hello and welcome to today's episode of Incited. Each week, I want to highlight a student pursuing something that they care about. I'm Haley, and as much as I love listening to podcasts, I recently noticed a significant lack of podcasts aimed at high schoolers. From businesses to books to the arts, the possibilities are endless for my generation to educate, inspire, and change the world. In today's episode, I'm talking to Kyle Santoro, current high school senior and founder of LC2 Productions and Red Curb 3. Kyle is an avid filmmaker with projects ranging from high school football hype videos to a full documentary called Fentanyl High that talks about the current fentanyl crisis, to working with a local county office to make an e-bike safety PSA. Okay, thank you so much for coming on to Incited today. Let's start by you can tell me a little bit about yourself and I guess why you're here.
Thank you for having me on this podcast. I really appreciate it. My name is Kyle Santoro, and I'm 17, and I'm originally from the Bay Area. I was born in San Francisco, and when I was 2 years old, I moved to Taipei, Taiwan, and I'm half Taiwanese, Italian American, and I stayed in Taiwan from when I was 2 years old all the way to 12 years old. And then I
Wow.
moved back to the United States for seventh grade in 2018. And I went to Chinese public school in Taiwan.
Awesome. And then I know that now, like, you're really interested in filmmaking. So I guess what have you done with that in the past few years?
I kind of began my journey with filmmaking about 2 years ago, 2 years and 3 months ago, almost. I bought my first camera about 2 years, 3 months ago, Sony A6400 camera that was at San Jose Camera Store, and I love that community at the San Jose Camera Store. They're awesome. And, it started with a short homelessness PSA video I did. I'm kind of capturing the homelessness problem in San Francisco on my iPhone. And that kind of led to me wanting to buy a camera to see kind of where that would go. And so after I bought that camera, it was around, I think, $1,500. My dad bought it for me, and he said that I have to pay him back. That was the only condition that he had to buy it. And so I agreed, and he bought that camera along with some additional gear, which was like around $400, which I had to pay him back as well. And so I he bought that camera for me, and that week was the first opening football game of my sophomore year, which was 2 years ago. And I filmed it, and that was the first ever time I got to use that camera in action. And so I made a hype video out of that for my school, and they respond, and I posted it on social media, and the responses were great. People loved it. And so I kind of kept doing that, and it spread from, just doing football videos and hype videos, football, doing girls volleyball, hockey, basketball for my school. After a while, it kind of branched out to, on social media, other kids from other schools started seeing it. And at the time, there weren't that many kids yet doing a lot of camera work around here. I started doing a lot of freelance work for other schools. I did a lot of freelance work for private and public schools like St. Francis, Midi, Valley Christian, Bellarmine, Burlingame High School, Sacred Heart Cathedral, Sacred Heart Preparatory in Menlo Atherton High School, Branham, Lee High School, Lincoln High School in San Francisco, Mountain View, a lot of lots and lots of schools for sports. And at that time, I hadn't founded LC2 Productions yet. At that time, I was only going under Kyle Santoro Media, so KS Media. And in January of that year, I founded LC2 Productions and then kind of replaced that KS Media kind of brand into my actual company, LC2 Productions, and then started doing all my work under the company name. And the transition was smooth. It was fine. People really liked it, and I've kind of stuck with that since. And then, in December of that year, that's when I also started, after I kind of build a little foundation of supporters in a community, I started doing a lot more work around the nonprofit sector. So I've worked with, numerous nonprofits to create, you know, highlight reels for them and advertisement work, and ranging anywhere from, here to San Francisco, and in all different areas. So, you have social justice areas, you have climate change. So, for example, I made a PSA video my sophomore year in March for Santa Clara County Fire Department to use and to promote on National Earth Awareness Day about climate change and forest fires. So that was to educate teenagers the effects of, California forest fires, and to kind of see, the damages that the fires have caused in California. And I've done a lot of work for a lot of nonprofits, and then it also expanded to me doing work for companies, anywhere from sport clubs or teams all the way to, dentists. And, for our school district, I did all of the Mosaic videos last year. So the Mosaic board hired me for that. And so they would write the scripts out for me to follow. And I just kind of followed their lead with those videos, and I produced those videos for them. And then my most recent project that I took on almost a year ago, so in a month it'll be a year ago, is Fentanyl High. And that this project that I'm working on, Fentanyl High, is a project designed to spread awareness to teenagers about the fentanyl crisis going on in our country from a peer-to-peer point of view, not from, an adult or an authority level addressing teenagers. So you're going to be hearing it directly from teenagers. And of course, we have drug experts in the film so that we have dense information there. And we have parents in the film of who have lost their kids to fentanyl. So it'll be quite the emotional roller coaster. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. And we're partnered with, a lot of people on this project. For example, my school district is on this, and, I have Santa Clara County Fire Department on board. I have Los Gatos Rotary Club, the town of Los Gatos, and many more partners coming. Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, the SCOOP program under the county, Q Corner. And after this project is screened, which it'll be screened in December 6th, we will start the distribution process to schools, hospitals, health clinics around the country.
Wow. I mean, I can't believe that you've done all of this in what you said, like 2 years and 3 months ago, you got your first camera. Did
Yeah.
filmmaking come easy to you, or was there a lot of roadblocks in the beginning? When did this really start to ramp up, or was it always just smooth sailing?
I'm from, originally, like, my entire family, going back to my great grandfather, we've all been in the arts. So, for example, both my parents worked in the art industry in San Francisco for over 25 years. So my dad was a world music producer. He founded the San Francisco World Music Festival a while ago. Um, and my mom was a modern dancer in San Francisco at the time when they met in San Francisco, which is where I was born. And so it's, with our family, and my sister is a ballerina as well. She's a sophomore. So she dances as well. So, all of us are kind of in the same region of, art. So it's kind of been great to have, a community like that at home, and support like that at home, to be able to be on the same page with my family. But in terms of, roadblocks, um, I'd say it's really started to, ramp up in terms of um, time, time and effort. I'd say in, probably March of my sophomore year was when I was like, I just, after that project I did for Santa Clara County Fire, it just kind of clicked, and I just started, grinding and doing lots and lots of projects, all the way up until now. Oh, I forgot to mention, I did do a short documentary with a Berkeley football player. His name's Jaden Ott. And so he's number one at Berkeley right now on the football team. And he broke all the Pac-12 records
Wow.
in the past 2 years as a true freshman. He's a great guy. He's amazing. He's from Southern California. And, so I've done a lot of projects in the past, 2 years, and while balancing, school and my grades and just my own mental health. So I'd say, the time management is really the key because, junior year was hard with balancing school and this project, specifically Fentanyl High, because the amount of time I've had to put into it, along with balancing, my academic life has been significant.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask a little more about that. Like, how has your filmmaking and LC2 affected your school and social life? Because you mentioned that you work a lot with your school, you work a lot with like schools in the same area. So I was a little curious about that.
So, my company, LC2 Productions, is pretty well known at my school, um, and by the community of my town, Los Gatos. And I do a lot of the school activities as well. And I film the Lit Dub for the past 2 years, which is an activity that our school holds every year for the whole community, for the whole school community to come out and have a fun time. And on a town level, I've worked with the Los Gatos Montessorino Police Department and the town of Los Gatos and the Los Gatos Youth Commission to make e-bike safety campaign videos for the town and the police department. And they also screened it at Spring into Green. It's like an event that the town participates in. So, that was impactful in terms of educating teenagers about the dangers of e-bikes, because these devices can, or these vehicles can go up to 35 miles an hour, and kids, especially right now, riding those bikes around with no helmets, multiple people, and there's been numerous accidents in our community. So yeah, the school resource officer, Mr. Milroy, or Officer Milroy, approached me about that, about in February, I'd say, of 2023. And we just kind of worked on that for 2 months. And they also screened those videos in the town council, chamber of commerce. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. It's awesome that you did that. Like, I know I myself am always hearing about kids getting into accidents, like specifically on, I think, the Super 73 e-bikes. So having a
Yep.
video
Yep.
like out about that is definitely really interesting. I was
Hmm.
curious, you mentioned before that you relatively recently moved all of your work over from Kyle Santoro Media to LC2. What was the motivation behind that?
Oh yeah, that's I forgot to talk about that. So LC2 Productions started after, I there's this drawing or painting that my sister did when she was 2 years old and I was 4 years old. So this was probably back in like 2010, and my sister drew basically the logo of my company, drew it out on a cardboard. She painted it, and I took so that at that time I found it in our house, and that was also during the period of time where I wanted to make a company and kind of go in that direction. So I found that painting and I made it my logo, and it's a very personal logo to me because my sister is a large part of my life, and I adore her. So that reminds me of my family. And I created the website, LC2 Productions, um, and people, like I said, people were pretty fascinated by the unique logo. And yeah, that's kind of where LC2 Productions started, and that was in, I think, January 6th of 2022.
Wow. It's a really inspiring story, especially, like with your sister. And I know before you mentioned that your whole family is like involved in the arts, so they have an extra sort of level of understanding for the stuff that you do. Have any of your family members ever like said anything to you that really stuck with you, like a piece of advice or something?
Yeah, I mean, tons. Like I said, my great grandfather was an architect in Staten Island, New York. So that's where my dad's side of the family immigrated to in the early 20th century. And so Staten Island, he was my great grandfather was an architect, and so was my grandfather. He was a sculptor and an architect. So my great grandfather, he designed the Verrazano Bridge in New York and had that
Wow.
implemented. So he worked in the construction area and architecture area. And my grandpa's sister went to Pratt Institute for Design, and so he trained my grandfather and his siblings to have that artistic eye from a very young age. So my grandfather ended up moving to Ohio, which is where now my family is is from. And he pursued architecture and sculpting, and he made a lot of beautiful pieces for the state of Ohio. He had a studio called Studio 100, and he made a lot of pieces for the Wendy's headquarters in Ohio, the state of Ohio, and so many places in Ohio. So, whenever we go back and visit, there's so many relics around in the state of Ohio that he made. So that definitely put an influence on my father at some point to become or pursue the life of an artist. And then my dad, after he graduated from Ohio State, he drove a motorcycle across the country to California, San Francisco, and that's kind of where he started within the art industry. And in terms of something that stuck with me, probably that my dad said is that there's no mold for art. Nobody's going to guide you. You have to carve out your own path. There's no easy way out. It's only hard work and dedication. And art is meant to rip you apart and put you back together.
Wow. That's a really beautiful saying and piece of advice that I think can apply to a lot of facets of life. And especially like, like
Yeah,
yeah, especially with art, I feel like a lot of people just think that making art is easy when in reality it's anything, but that. And
yeah, I would
yeah,
definitely agree with that.
yeah, definitely quoting that. Another question that I wanted to ask is what was the process like of because I know you started out as Kyle Santoro Media. What was the process like starting your own media company? Like was there anything different rather than just posting your videos that you were making for your school or was there like a whole process?
Yeah, so before I made a company, it's kind of you're considered as more of a freelance videographer, or you're kind of limited to, under your school's name almost because you're obviously a student at school. And so people who don't go to your school might only recognize your page or your work as the schools. So, I've after I founded my company, it just kind of gave me more leverage in terms of independence from from like anything that's attached to the school. So, it was kind of a good outlet for me to kind of expand my work and with whom I work, my circle, and just kind of learning a lot of skills about running a company and, kind of just being able to be fully present and also balance a company while balancing school because that's extremely important to me and my family. And yeah, like I said, a lot of skills and experiences that I've learned through running a company.
Wow. One thing you mentioned is that you work with some others. Did you originally plan on working with others, or were you originally planning on working solo, or how did that work out?
Well, it's kind of been the same, but I'd say before my company, it was more like you're paying, a kid, a freelance 15-year-old to come out and just cover your event. That's kind of how it was perceived. And then, it's like hiring this company to come out and help us. And, with the company, you have to have, there's a lot of legal stuff as well. So, you have W-9 contracts, which, before you didn't have to do because, companies need to file their tax returns and a lot of different things like that, bank accounts, wiring, payment methods, setting quotes. There's a lot of different things that, you learn in the process of running a company rather than just being a freelance videographer. And those are all skills that I will for sure apply to whatever I do in the future. And whether that's, expanding my company or expanding my projects, I'll for sure be using everything that I've learned in the past 2 years. So,
Wow. I wanted to switch the gear a little bit more to Fentanyl High. What inspired you to, create Fentanyl High?
okay. So like I said, in about November of 2022, the principal of my school approached me and was curious if I'd be interested in helping him create, or the school district create a PSA or short video of the dangers of fentanyl for them to use across the dual campus that the district has. And I obviously was interested and I said yes. So originally this project was supposed to be like a 5-minute video. And then later on, like a week later, another organization approached me and wanted pretty much the exact same thing. And then also at this point, between that time period and around that in that month, there were so many news stories um, of, fatal overdoses of teenagers, not just locally, but across the country. And you just, the the images of parents grieving over their kids was just, it was very, very sad. And at that point, um, at that point, I was done with the other projects I had been working on at the time, and I said, why not just make this into a documentary, which then led to me pitching it to both of the school and the organization. And that formed my film. And it wasn't called Fentanyl High yet, but we were going on that track in that direction of making this project happen. And it was originally supposed to be more of a local thing, but then Song for Charlie got involved, and that kind of drove this to be even more than just a local Bay Area project. And then, so we had probably 3.5 months of just pre-production, fundraising, grants. So we received about Song for Charlie gave us a $10,000 grant for this project. And they're one of the funders out of the list of supporters and organizations that we're partnering with on this project. And so we didn't actually even start filming until March of 2023. Um, and then we held the first cut of the film on May 16th of 2023 in my high school's auditorium, which we had a turnout of about, I'd say, around 600 people, including myself and my cast and my interviewees and my producers and my staff. So that was a great turnout. And we had feedback surveys that we provided to the crowd or the audience to get feedback on the first cut of the film. And so that feedback that people submitted, we are now taking that feedback, making revisions to that draft or that cut of the film and developing it into a feature documentary. So right now, that's kind of what I'm working on. And in about 2 weeks, I'll be working with a film composer to score original music for this project. And also, I'll be working with a colorist in New York as well to color grade this project. So there's a lot to do.
Wow. That's really awesome that in what was it? Because you showed the first cut in like May, in like 2 months, you were able to put
Yeah.
together a full
Hmm.
movie that could be screened.
Yeah,
I was curious.
that
Oh, what were you saying? Sorry, my bad.
that first cut was about 55 minutes, including the credits. So it was already considered a feature documentary, but in terms of the structure of the film, I didn't really count it as a feature yet. It wasn't totally developed yet, which is why we wanted the feedback survey so that we could take that feedback and add more cut stuff, different perspectives. So that's exactly what we're doing right now. So yeah, a lot to do. Our due date is probably literally 2 months from now, December 6th. We're going to be screening the final cut of the film in the theater downtown, the movie theater downtown in Los Gatos, in collaboration with the Board of Supervisors of Santa Clara County, so and the town of Los Gatos. So we'll be distributing Narcan, which is a very helpful product to help prevent overdoses. So we're going to be distributing that at the movie theater at the event, um, in collaboration with the Scoop, Santa Clara County opioid prevention program under the county at that screening.
Wow. That's really awesome that you're spreading awareness about this.
Working on this project has taken, I'd say, quite a toll on me, emotionally, just because the topic and um, just the relationship that you develop with the people you with whom you work. um it's just there's such a significant amount of trust that people have to put into me to really have them open up about themselves and their stories, um and especially with a topic like this involving death, and unfortunately the deaths of teenagers. um it's pretty hard, emotionally, to hear parents talking about their kids who are not around anymore, um and being in their space, present with them, knowing that is is it's chilling. um and the, the main reason why I'm even doing this project is to prevent that from happening to you know my peers, anybody who's within the range of teenagehood, and preventing this drug from ripping apart families like the way it did to numerous people I've gotten to know in the past year. And this project is something that once it's done, it'll be distributed pretty widely, just because it's from a direct point of view of a teenager and of other teenagers who are in the film, and you're hearing it directly from people your age. And it's not just a don't do drug type of video, film or project. It's also diving into the social science and psychology behind why teenagers are looking for these kinds of coping mechanisms, these kinds of outlets, and why teenagers are even reaching for drugs, why they are reaching for alcohol, what is leading them to make those decisions. And like I said, you're hearing it from your peers, people your age, and I don't think there's anything more impactful than that, especially with a topic that involves death at this time.
Wow. I mean, definitely from what you've told me about Fentanyl High, it sounds like this is going to be extremely impactful. And then I know that you said that you're going to try and distribute it more like around the country. But I think that this is incredibly important for promoting awareness. So you mentioned that you talked to a lot of the families and friends of people who had passed away due to fentanyl overdoses. Is there anything that maybe you heard about or that they said? And I don't want to get into anything too like personal or anyone's
Uh-huh.
like extremely personal business, but was there anything that you heard that I guess you didn't really think about before like going into producing Fentanyl High? And I get if certain things like you can't talk about because of the
No, yeah, yeah.
seriousness and the gravity.
I'd say one thing that stuck out to me is you know 3 days prior to that first cut of the film, a girl died from fentanyl poisoning at Lee High School, which is in our community. Um, and that was hard hearing that because that was exactly what I was trying to prevent. Um, and I've heard from teenagers who have lost somebody to this drug that um, it doesn't really hit you until it hits you, or it hits someone you love or know personally. And then that's when you realize how bad this epidemic is and how fatal it is, how horrible it is. How it destroys families, parents, and the relationships between parents and siblings and communities. And that's like exactly what I'm trying to prevent by doing this project. And that's a theme that I've held across all of the work I've done. Um, it's work that I'm extremely passionate about. I don't take on any projects that I'm not emotionally invested in. So yeah.
I guess there's so much that you wouldn't really know about the whole fentanyl epidemic if it weren't for, talking to the families and friends of these people who have known others who passed away due to fentanyl, because it's such a complicated and like convoluted issue that is relatively new, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been, probably around in past, within the past decade, it's been like a 500% increase in the area. And I think specifically in Santa Clara County, um,
Yeah.
500% increase with, fentanyl. And that was quoted from Joe Simidian, and he's on the board of supervisors for the county. It's a serious epidemic, and the main lead of deaths, or I mean the main people dying from fentanyl are still adults in this country. The problem is the highest, or the rate at which teenage deaths are ascending at is it's going up really quickly, and that's like um the skyrocketing age range of kids dying right now are 10 to 15 or 10 to 18, anywhere in between that age range. But now fentanyl is the number one cause for death of teenagers in this country. So it's surpassed car crashes. It's surpassed murder. So fentanyl is it's up there, and it's killing a lot of teenagers and pulling families apart throughout this country. So
That's extremely sad, I feel like, just with how fast it's growing. And then, but I mean, I know films like yours and then other fentanyl awareness, like media, will hopefully help to, bring those numbers back down. But yeah, I
yeah,
think what you're doing, like spreading awareness about it. So hopefully all these deaths can lower sometime soon.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'd like to sort of switch into hopefully a lighter note. Thank you so much for talking about Fentanyl High, by the way. I know that it's like
yeah, yeah.
fentanyl and everything is a very like sensitive subject and definitely difficult to talk about. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking about it. I hear that you're starting up a new company called or company or nonprofit called
It's
Red
a
Curb
nonprofit.
3. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe talk a little bit about that, like if you can. Like I know it's not fully launching for a
Uh,
while, but
yeah.
what are your goals with that?
So, with Red Curb 3, that, the name I kind of got from in Taiwan, the curb in front of our apartment, it was a red curb. It was like a very old red, faded, antiquated red curb. So, that was like the kind of the vision I was going for. The three in the name would be focusing on, animal rights because my family is vegetarian. I've been vegetarian my entire life since I was born. And, my parents were animal rights activists before I was born. So that's one of out of the three things that Red Curb 3 represents. The second one would be social justice, because that's also something that I'm very passionate about in terms of activism and storytelling through different perspectives. Speaking as a biracial kid, especially, and living in two parts of the world. And the third thing out of the three is climate change, because climate change is serious and it's no joke. And people need to be aware of it. And the whole point of this nonprofit is to produce project based media or art, mainly art, in many different forms to inform society about these three things. This organization won't just be supporting my projects, but supporting, you know, anybody who would be producing projects within those three categories. Obviously, I'm still figuring out all of the, financial, technical stuff within that organization, but it's obviously going to be quite a process, but that's kind of the direction that I'd like to be going in with that nonprofit. Um, so
Yeah, I think that's awesome that you're using your platform to talk about like an even like wider range of issues. And then you also mentioned like, supporting like other people's projects. And I think that everything you're doing, like with Red Curb 3, with LC2, with Fentanyl High is just really amazing. Do you have like any advice that you'd give to maybe teenagers or I mean even like
yeah,
younger kids like trying to get into filmmaking?
yeah, I'll say I have, the message I have for teenagers in general in high school is, or if you're a teenager coming into high school, is to really invest in yourself, invest in something you're passionate about. And when I say invest, I mean put all of your time into that. Don't get caught up in, unrealistic high school culture. That's how I put it. Don't let other people limit you. Do not take things for granted. Really, really work hard at what you do while also learning how to time manage and balance your life, whether that be, if you have a sport, passion, outside of school, your mental health, extracurriculars, and or academics. Learn how to balance all of it. Really invest your time into building your identity, because all of these factors will add up and really form your identity, so that when you leave high school, you'd really know who you are and that you're grounded and that you have a foundation that to build off of, so that you're not blindly going into either college, or if you don't pursue college, if you're not blindly going into the real world outside of high school, not knowing who you are. 4 years is a long time. And if you use it wisely, you can get a lot done with 4 years.
I think that that's really good advice, especially like because you said 4 years is a long time and only like 2 years you've been able to accomplish so much. As sort of a final question that I kind of want to ask everyone, it's kind of a silly one. If you were locked in a room for one person, alive or dead, for 1 hour, who would that person be? I know it's random. I'm sorry. It's just
No, no, no. It's a
sort
good
of wrap
question.
up question that I want to ask everyone.
It's a great question. If I were locked in a room for an hour with somebody and I could pick who that person is, I'd probably pick Steven Spielberg, because after I watched The Fablemans, which was his most recent film, that movie felt extremely personal, especially because, he went to Saratoga High School, which is around where I live. So he did all of the activities senior year that, I would be doing, senior ditch day. And that's all in that film about his autobiography, and his life. And obviously, every person has their struggles with their family or within society. Every person has their battle, their struggle. And, I was watching that film and it just felt very personal. So, and he's an amazing director and he uses his culture and his brilliant.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good choice. If you were locked in a room for like 1 hour with somebody. Thank you so much for coming on to Incited today. And then
Yeah,
where can
thank you for
people,
having me.
yeah, where can people find you, LC2, Red Curb 3, and Fentanyl High, like online, on Instagram,
Yeah,
etc.?
so my Instagram is Kyle A. Santoro. And my Instagram for my company is LC2 Productions. My website is lc2productions.com. Fentanyl High has its own website, fentanylhigh.com, or you could find it on LC2 Productions as well.
Once again, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and have a
Yeah,
good evening.
yeah, you too. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Incited, and be sure to subscribe and get notified when the next episode is released. Be sure to check out Kyle on Instagram at Kyle A. Santoro. That's KyleASantoro. And check out LC2 Productions at LC2 Productions on Instagram. That's LC, the number 2, Productions. You can also find information about LC2 on lc2productions.com and information about Fentanyl High at fentanylhigh.com. That's FENTANYL high.com. And as for me, you can find Incited on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all under at Incited Podcast, INSIGHTED Podcast, and more information at incitedpodcast.com. See you next time.